Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who has a tattoo with Halo 6's release date on his, well, let's just say in a place where few people will ever see it.
Tim Longo.
Hello!
Hello!
It's our first time ever recording in the same place, so let's hope that this sounds okay.
A very special podcast where I'm looking you in the eye, and it's super weird.
It's a little
Of
uncomfortable.
course, Brett has one eye, as you may not know.
I have a third eye in the center of my forehead.
Uh-huh.
I'm the guy in that episode of Twilight Zone.
We're in my basement.
Yeah, so we have all the benefits of being together and having Tim's great audio environment at our disposal.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. Couldn't be better.
We have a lot of bouncy, echoey walls in here. We're recording on Omni. We don't know what we're doing with the mic situation.
It's a mess.
And I discovered for the first time that I've been using the mic incorrectly
For a year and a half.
Revelation, as Brett was setting up his mic. We first tried to record with two mics, which was obviously folly. We don't know what we're doing. And got feedback. But then he set his mic up, and I'm like, why is your mic pointed that way? Isn't it supposed to point this way?
Not so much, I'm afraid.
I'm an idiot. I never read the directions and just used it like you use it in a movie. Like, that's my education. Well, yeah, that's how they do it in the movies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's the way to do it. If J-Lo does it that way, then it must be okay.
It must be how it's gone, yes.
Okay. Well done. So I'm glad we got that straightened out. And in the future, maybe you'll be able to hear Tim a little bit more clearly. And he
Let's
won't
hope.
sound so, I don't know, whiny. No, probably not.
It's not gonna help that.
It's not gonna change the tenor of your voice.
No. I'm always going to sound like this, Brett.
Right. So we decided to do something a little bit different this time. In addition to recording together, we decided we'd sort of take a break from Mario World, mostly because I didn't get a chance to play it all because, I was shipping a video game. Since last we spoke, Tacoma came out. Would have come out right before the podcast episode last week. And I was a little bit busy and flying out here to the Pacific Northwest from Maryland, where I normally live and spend my time, and there was no time in my life to play anything else. And I don't have a handheld device that can play the game. So,
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's appreciated, and it's been my life, and probably will continue to be for a few weeks. But in any case, we decided to take a quick break from this and play something a little bit more recent. I brought my Switch along with me. I played a couple of hours of this game, and so did Tim. It's Breath of the Wild. We had a lot of feedback asking for our thoughts.
Yeah.
It's, it would have been better to do this with Link to the Past, admittedly, but having us together and being able to, I actually sat and watched Tim play and saw the things he did differently from me, and he could ask questions of me, and he found things I didn't find, so it was good. You know, he's a veteran. He's played some Zeldas. And now I actually know how to cook in that game, so that's good. I was missing out on that. But I don't know. First impressions, what did you think?
It's weird because I've heard so many people talk about this game up to this point, and so I'm in this weird frame of mind, especially the other podcasts I listen to. And there's aspects of it that are Zelda, but then it doesn't completely feel like a Zelda game.
Right.
You know, and I know that that's one of the criticisms / observations that people have had, etc. But, I'm kind of just in the couple hours that I played, I'm very, I have this inner turmoil. I'm kind of mixed because I really want to play more. I like those sorts of open world games, and we can talk about some of the details of kind of, what we've experienced as we've been playing, but I want it. I guess I want it to be a little more Zelda so far too.
Right.
And I'm still in the middle, maybe 3/4 of the way through A Link Between Worlds,
right?
As we've talked about,
which you love, yes.
It's an amazing, maybe. I know this is saying a lot, but I think it might be the best traditional Zelda structured game. And there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, Breath of the Wild, the best Zelda ever." I just don't buy it yet. I mean, other than sort of the signature sounds and the
the character and
audio trills,
sure.
yeah, and kind of some of the interesting backstory with the 100 years later. Kind of, it's 100 years ago. the kingdom fell and
Right, but I mean, I sort of feel like that happened with Wind Waker too, right? There
yeah.
was a prior
Yeah.
civilizations that is now under the waves, and
Yeah.
so that isn't necessarily non-Zelda or a different approach to a Zelda thing. In fact, it's often the case. I feel like Twilight Princess even had some of this where it felt like the
Yeah.
world had kind of moved on a little bit. I think that's part of the mystique of the game in general.
They repeat those tropes.
Those
over
things certainly
and over
happen again and again and again.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel you as far as this feels like a different game with Zelda put on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You take your ingredients from Zelda, and then you say, okay, we're going to take all those ingredients that are in every Zelda game, and then we're going to put a fundamentally different design underneath.
Yeah. And not only that, but the other thing we talked a little bit about is you can. I think it's unfair to say that they're on the surface, but you can see the influences. Like with every system you encounter, cooking being one example, right? Like there's a lot of cooking and crafting out there these days. And Minecraft being a really good example of that.
Absolutely.
Recipe building.
Sure.
And, I feel like when I first went to the first, what are they called? Shrines. The bomb shrine, the first bomb shrine where you get on the plateau. It almost, because that's the one where you have to. They have those sort of like machines that are like pushing. They're
Right.
like moving back and forth, and they push
Pistons.
pistons.
They're like pistons shooting
that are,
these bombs, to the other side.
right. And they show a ball kind of being thrown from one piston to another, and there's kind of this mechanism going on, and it's kind of all of the shrines seem to be built from the same modules. That's very Portal. I got this Portal vibe from it, right?
Sure,
Where it's like they're teaching you these mechanics in very simple ways, and like each shrine seems like a cool puzzle room. Which this isn't. I'm not saying that I hate it or that it's a bad thing. Like it's wonderful. You can definitely see the craftsmanship, but I just see these little and who knows if they're actual influences or not.
Right.
Or
Right.
And I made the joke. There's like, well, are these games being influenced? Are these games influencing Zelda, or has Zelda been influencing these games all along? And this weird full circle thing has happened?
And it's finally bringing these things back in. I mean, the other thing we mentioned obviously was Assassin's Creed, because you have these huge towers that shoot up, and although you didn't have to climb the first one, I don't know what's going to happen later as far as those go. I mean, we basically each had that tower and then a few shrines, and that's all we've played. Just
you can teleport to the top of them anyway, right?
Right, and you can teleport to the top of them.
But the later ones you haven't gone to
I don't.
yet.
Yes,
Yeah,
I haven't gotten any others, so I don't know if that mechanic is the same always.
Right.
But the thing is that as soon as you get to the top of that, it reveals more of the map, and I do like the difference of being able to look through your basically binoculars and pick out some things in the environment and just mark them and now see on your map where that is.
Yeah.
But even that, I've seen in a game like Miasmata, which is a PC sort of survival title. I don't know if you know that one.
I've heard of it, but no.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting game. I never finished it, but I played enough to kind of get a feel for it. Certainly heard a lot about it on other podcasts. So there's that. There's like marking territory, which is really good and feels good in this sort of game. I mean, one of the things that Bethesda games do is they just put those things on your map as you find them.
Right. That's what I was going to say. And Ubisoft staple, right? And that's one of the things that long before we are talking about this here, every podcast, every reviewer talked about, like, is there a brilliance in that decision, right? Where they are not marking, intentionally not marking as a really strict design choice anything on the map for the most part.
Right.
And you have to discover it. And there is an inherent loop there that you don't get in an Assassin's Creed game that I will admit is cool.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
it's like it's one of those simple, elegant decisions that you don't think of at the time. We're like, well, of course we're just going to tell everyone where everything is.
Right.
Pretty much every open world game does that. But then what if you didn't?
Yes.
It's like,
what if you had to find all that? What if instead of having a long checklist of a million things you're supposed to do to get, I don't know, the achievement or whatever, Nintendo doesn't have that stuff. They never spend any time on the meta, the meta game, I guess, that is shared between users. There's no pissing match on Zelda or rather on Nintendo platforms. But of course, that's been a long staple, going back to PS3 and Xbox 360.
Well, I mean, like you give me crap over still playing Witcher, for instance, right? And since Zelda came out, and I hadn't played it yet, but hearing people talk about that mechanic, I continue playing Witcher, and I'm coming up on like 170 hours or something, right? Like it's getting
Good.
because
Criminy.
I'm doing literally every question mark, every little thing I can do. I'm going to do it all. However, since that idea had been put into my head, now that I play Witcher, after knowing that design from Zelda, there is a psychological effect of just looking on the map and going to the thing, not knowing there's something there. I didn't have to discover it. They told me it was there.
Yes.
And it's just this like checklist of like almost like a job.
Sure.
You're just going because the designer is holding your hand, and or the UI or the system is holding your hand, and you're just going from point to point to point to point until you get them all. Versus here, where you gotta, like you said, you look through the binocular, the scope, or whatever it's called.
Right.
You're like, oh, there's one.
And the Sheikah slate.
And the visual language has told you that. The line of sight, the composition of.
Right. I mean, this has to be a really good like Disneyland experience because you have to have the sight lines.
They had to think like, and when that old man tells us to go to the top of the tower to go and scope out each of the shrines, I guess there was sort of an inherent thought in my head of like, oh, that's not going to work. I'm not going to get to the tower and see all the shrines. That's ridiculous. Right. But you get up there and you're scanning around like, sure enough, oh, there's one.
There's one.
There's one. And you're tagging them. That's hard level design. That's world design where you actually have to think about all that stuff.
You understand why it takes 7 years.
Yeah, right.
Or whatever it took. I mean, to do those sorts of things, to just make that hard right turn of, we're just going to take away things that are basically taken for granted, that are the Ubisoft model of open world design and are similar in Bethesda's games. Those are more, you expose them as you kind of come near them.
Yeah, I feel like Bethesda has maybe like a nice hybrid. Like I feel like it's kind of a combo of kind of exploration, discovery, as well as here's a thing, go after it. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Right. Well, they certainly have compass
radar
points. So on the radar, it tells you where things are.
The compass tells you where things are. Sure. But is it everything? I guess I don't remember.
It's not. It won't tell you about encounters. It'll tell you about specific locations, points of interest, basically.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's every cave in a town or whatever will show up on there.
But it won't be on your map until you get there.
Until you get there and it says discovered.
Which is different from say a Witcher or
right.
Like one thing that Witcher, we're getting into the weeds, but one thing that Witcher does do well, I think, is sometimes, like, not everything is on your map at the start, and some things are revealed via quest or talking to somebody, or discovering another thing.
Right.
So kind of like there's some breadcrumbs. So I've gotten to the point in the game where I've talked to everybody, so I know where everything is. But yeah, the game doesn't start that way, so that's fair. So they're a little bit of a hybrid too, but still, point being, they made it. That's a kind of a big fundamental thing that maybe people don't appreciate as much as they probably should. But yeah, I mean, going back to the original question, like 2 hours in or whatever, it's a weird Zelda game.
It is. It's a very weird Zelda
cool.
game. I mean, one of the things we were talking about over dinner or after we had played a little bit was, you always have the go to this thing, then this thing, then this thing in a Zelda game. And here, you did the shrines in a different order. Yeah. I haven't gotten to the third one you did, and you haven't gotten to the third one I did. I actually had to look up, because I was doing it on the plane the other day, what power I got. So in these first bits of shrines, we get different special powers. My understanding, though, is that the shrines will get a little bit deeper later on. Yeah. And they'll still be kind of puzzly. Yeah. But since you'll already have most of the tools in your toolkit, it'll be more, how do I combine these? Because they'll know you have them all. Yeah. Because you have to get all of them to get off this plateau, right? So they know. So, it may be a little bit putting the cart before the horse to say it doesn't follow the normal mechanisms of a Zelda game, because we're still in the tutorial area.
Yeah, the Grand Plateau, whatever it is, that does feel the most, the traditional. But if I can imagine where it will go after we get off of that thing, and we have what I'm to understand, we'll have most of the abilities at that point.
Yes,
and we'll be leaving.
But we'll be getting better gear and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll run into the Gorons. I know there's shark people.
Yeah.
There's all these kinds of things that I've just seen from the internet. But
well, my question to Brett when we were talking about that, I guess one worry I have in that regard is, once we start seeing those iconic characters and going on quests for them, how much do they relate back to any sort of macro story of what's going on? And of course, famously, you can apparently go after Ganon right away if you want to.
Sure.
No matter
If you have the
powerful
skills,
you
right?
are, whatever, So that kind of tells me that there isn't really a macro story or through line that you have to go on. Maybe they kind of talk about, him or something,
sure,
but an indirect way. But there isn't like that thing that thread that's pulling you through potentially. So, like for me in a game like Minecraft, which like in survival mode has some thrust of survival, of course, but I kind of lose my steam when I don't really have like an end goal.
Sure.
I don't really have a reason other than just continuing to survive, continuing to build, whatever. Versus my daughter when we play,
or pure exploration. I mean, there are people who just enjoy that aspect of these sorts of games, and I think they've really tilted to that.
Yeah.
And so there's,
but if
as longtime Zelda, as longtime Zelda players, we're wondering, well, but are they going to keep me engaged in the way Zelda games have kept me engaged in the past? Layering these abilities in a reasonable way. I mean, here it seems like they're giving us all the kind of big abilities right out from the beginning, so they have to have some different sort of progression to do the other stuff. Now, I know they experimented with this in Skyward Sword as well.
and there is some in Link Between Worlds.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I think my prediction, this is my prediction I'll say on the podcast, is that ultimately I will finish Breath of the Wild someday, and I will still, in my heart, feel that Link Between Worlds is the best combination, because there's definitely open world. You can see them testing out stuff in Link Between Worlds that ended up in this game.
Interesting.
Like you can see that, and I haven't played Skyward Sword, so there's probably some of that in there too. But you can see some of the, for instance, they didn't have weapon durability in Link Between Worlds, but they had renting weapons.
Right.
Right. Where
they also had that in Skyward Sword.
Yes. So you can get something early, but there's a limited resource, quote unquote, to have it.
So you'll get the bombs, but you only have the 5 or 10 of them, and you'd have to pay lots and lots of rupees to get more.
Or if you die,
that's one thing that's missing.
Them. Yeah.
So far.
Yeah, there's no economy for that.
So far, yes.
Yeah, there might be something later.
Right. So far, the only economy that's come into play has been the soul orbs or whatever that we're going to give to this old man and get his parachute.
Right.
So just this one treasure that you get when you finish the shrine.
I mean, all that being said, as a video game, though, it seems amazing.
Yes, it feels fantastic.
I mean, it feels good. All of the materiality of the world and all of the different systems interacting.
Yes.
And, I mean, what were some of you were watching me play?
Yes,
which we've never been able to do before.
Right,
Historically,
exactly.
what were some of the things that we were doing differently? Like
you climbed a lot. You climbed way more than I did. You started climbing all over the place, and
I went the wrong direction. And Zelda, somebody's like, hey.
The voice. Yes, the voice is like trying to pull you the other way. But that happened to me too.
Okay.
I think as soon as you start climbing somewhere, it's trying to say, "Oh, you might already be. You may not know what you're supposed to be doing here."
Right.
And they're trying to, because they're in this tutorial area and they want you to get all the abilities. They want you to at least do that stuff first. Right. So I feel like as soon as you do something that it is even right off the side of the path. Even if I was going in the right direction and I saw some mushrooms, I started climbing, I got them, and I started climbing a little more. And it said, "Oh no, you need to go to this place on your map."
Right.
I was like, "Oh, okay, Mom." And I started going that way right away. You came out and went left and went up a wall. But you also climbed up to the top of the Temple of Time. I didn't do that.
Yeah, right. Climbing, I mean, just kudos to them.
Yeah.
Like you can climb anywhere.
It feels amazing, and
amazing.
You walk around sides. You called them the masters of contextual animation.
Yeah, I mean, and Ocarina, right? That was the revelation in Ocarina. Was like, wait, what? I don't have to press a button to climb this ladder.
Exactly.
Wait, I'm jumping across this gap by myself.
Exactly right.
We'll eventually play Ocarina, of course, someday.
Yes, we have to.
We'll talk much more about that, but that was. I mean, I remember having deep conversations about. We maybe talked about this before.
Certainly, we've talked about it with each other. I remember Wayne Klein being like, "You just run up to a thing and he just climbs it."
Because we were working on Indie at the time, or no? It was
you would have been working on Indie at the time.
Well, and that's the difference between the PC Indie and the N64 Indie versions, which you played the PC version.
I played the PC version,
but the N64 version is a better version because Nick Pavis. God love him, basically automated a bunch of that stuff, right? Where it was done similar, not exactly the same, but similar and more similar to Ocarina. But yeah, just like I guess because we talked about Soul Reaver, we talked a little bit about Tomb Raider from time to time, like just this need that everyone felt like the player somehow had to be engaged and inputting to everything that the character was doing.
Right.
That was just this assumption, I guess, that
Yes.
we all had. It was like,
Well,
that's just how you do it.
I think that comes from like Ultima games. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
that goes way back, and you look
Yeah.
at Ultima, and there's every key
Yeah.
is used. It's like,
keyboard.
well, if you want to lock something, that's a different than
Yeah.
unlock.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there was no contextuality at all. It was like every command, you have to use the right command at the right time. And we may play an Ultima game at some point, but I mean, when I went back and played that a couple of years ago, I was nearly driven mad by having to figure out what all these things did.
Yeah, it's like, you're playing a saxophone on the keyboard or something.
It's madness. There were so many different possibilities of what you could be doing at any one time, and it's nearly every letter.
So how did they? I mean, I guess we're a little far afield, but how? What was the line of thinking? And probably that the fellow that emailed us of the book that he wrote about
Right.
about Mario, maybe he's done some thinking on this, so he already knows the answer.
Yeah,
But how did they get to
Holland.
that point? And what I mean by that is we're playing Mario right now. We played Link to the Past. We played Metroid. And in those 2D games, there aren't contextual moments like that, right? It's really
No, it's
discrete,
just skills.
right? It's skills. It's discrete. Like if I don't press the button to jump over this chasm, or if I don't press
fall.
up or whatever, and I'm going to fall. But moving to 3D, which probably we'll talk about when we play Mario 64 as well, maybe with the usability of that, they realize that the camera control, in addition to the navigational control through usability and through their constant iteration, they kind of realize, well, we're going to have to automate some of this stuff. So the player isn't super... Because Tomb Raider is a good example, right? Tomb Raider 1. Tank controls,
Yes.
right angles,
Right.
but an analog character, so it's like if you don't hit that jump at the right angle, even though you can mess yourself up easily, and it's tank controls, it's a nightmare.
Yes.
Like another thing of like, you're pressing all the keys on the keyboard, and you're like trying to situate yourself just perfectly, and then you fall to your death into a pit, you know?
Right.
Like they want to avoid that stuff. So they're taking, I'm just brainstorming, but they're kind of taking variables away from the player so that you just don't freak out with all these different things to do.
Sure.
Maybe.
I mean, I think there's that, but I also think that was there was a limitation in the controls, I think, that forced that design, and right, because you've got 2 or 4 buttons instead of 26 plus the number keys plus shift, control, caps, etc.
Well, and the N64 controller was wackadoo. Right? Like,
it's a great controller.
it is, but it's very unorthodox.
It was
right?
very,
like,
very
it was like
strange.
One stick and one trigger, but like some shoulder. Like, it was just weird. Like they designed to that controller for
Sure.
Ocarina and Mario.
Is
Any game.
Is that the one Ray Gresco had to play in a paper bag? I think it is.
What do you mean?
Ray Gresco at LucasArts.
Oh, because
it was under NDA, and he would say it's just a bowl of green jelly that you put your hands in, but you have to think in Japanese. Which is a Firefox reference. Yeah, Clint Eastwood movie.
we're old.
We sure are.
See that movie though; it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I forgot about that. That's funny. Yeah, that whole thing. What was that the Revolution? What was the code name for?
I think it was Revolution. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I say that because, and this actually came up recently, maybe on DLC, because they were talking about the SNES Classic, and then there's kind of rumors that an N64 Classic's coming down the road. Any N64 native game like Ocarina or Mario 64 that's been ported to another platform has actually had controller issues because the button mapping is never one for one.
Right?
Yes, so
it's
like
very strange.
Mario 64 on a 3DS or a DS, it's not perfect because that's one thing that they're good at is they design to their controllers.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. They've started to standardize controllers now, so they have less of a problem with porting. But anyway, long story short, contextual animations still around.
Yes.
In Breath of the Wild.
Right.
In a great way.
In an amazing way. It never looks weird.
The climbing, man, I cannot believe I can
Yes.
climb. I was at the temple, and we're like,
Yes.
remember, I turned around. I was
Right.
I was running to the objective, and I was wait. I turned around, looked at the temple.
Saw it up there. I bet
I was
there's.
like,
I wonder if you can get
steeple?
up there. Yes.
There's got to be something up there, right?
Yes.
And And I don't have a lot of stamina, so we kind of had to finagle it. But then there's what was it? A bow, like a cool bow.
The good bow, the soldier bow.
Yeah. But I could climb all over that thing.
Yes.
It's like Colossus.
And it looked amazing.
That's another influence.
So that's the other big influence that I wanted to get to, which was, I mean, you said right off the bat, oh, this is stolen straight from Colossus. Even him coming out of the liquid bath or whatever from cryo, I assume.
Yeah.
They had to freeze their hero of time. He was a hero sickle.
There's another hero, by the way, that comes out of cryo.
Who was this thing?
He's also green, but he comes in armor.
Oh,
Master Chief.
I didn't know what you were talking about.
He owns cryo.
Thank you for explaining that. When you got to green, I was like, well, I guess it's not Ripley. But you said he.
There's a like, I feel like there's that kind of that disembodied voice really early on. It's just a lot of there's symbols on the walls, very shadows. And then we talked, like there's that pool in the temple in Shadows of Colossus.
Well, there's even a broken bridge.
A broken bridge.
I mean, and like in The Last Guardian, there's this huge plateau. Right?
Stamina meter. Climbing all over the place. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're saying obvious things I'm sure others have said many times of the influences, but I guess I'm just surprised at how kind of on the nose some of it is. And I mean, maybe that, I don't know. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
Maybe it's homage. Maybe, maybe there's some people that worked on both. I don't know. But when they're, like, the good thing that any influences that they do take from other games, they're still the masters of putting the right things together. Because it's not, we've talked about this before, but it's not as easy as just all the best ideas and put them in one game.
Right. Right.
You got to put the right ones together, and that's hard.
Right. Just
by itself. Like, you don't have to think of all the ideas, but putting the right ones together is super difficult. And Darksiders is the other one that comes to mind with that, right? That's kind of an interesting combination of influential. Because Darksiders 1 even has a portal thing? Am I remembering that right? There was a portal-ish, or am I thinking of Prey 1? Anyway, the original Prey.
Right, it might be Prey 1 that you're thinking, the original Prey.
Yes.
The 99 or whatever that was. 2000, something like that.
Climbing's amazing. So other shadows, climbing, the waking up thing we talked about, which is cool. Oh, and then we have to talk about the technology thing.
Yes.
The first.
Yeah, let's make that the final topic.
We're right on that, right? It's the first Zelda game with any sense of science fiction technology in it.
That I can think of. I can't remember another case where that would be so. Yeah. I mean, it always seems like it's magic. In Zelda games.
Well, it's very fantasy versus sci-fi.
Sure, right.
And this is we made many Assassin's Creed jokes,
right,
and Animus jokes of like, wait, what?
Right.
Is this all fake?
It does feel like he's in one of the Golden Apple type buildings.
Simulation.
You haven't played Assassin's Creed, but
no.
Yes, I mean, Tim was saying he's going to wake up and turn out to be Desmond Miles.
Desmond is not dead after all.
Here he is.
Spoiler.
No, I mean, there's definitely in as you get later in the Assassin's Creed series, you're finding these artifacts that were built by an ancient civilization that was here on Earth before us. Blah 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 whatever, and that's sort of what this stuff looks like with these basically constellation type things on the wall, but they look like. They look like lights and
you digitize like maps and ruins and into this.
They do it in such a Nintendo way. It turns into this condensing dew around the stalactite type device and drops, and then a drop drops onto your PDA, basically your Sheikah slate.
Yeah,
but it's clearly technology, right? I mean, he was clearly in technology at the beginning.
Well, when he teleports,
and he turns into
Star Trekian kind of thing going on.
It's certainly more whimsical than that because it kind of sprays in all different directions, and it's not kind of straight up and down.
It's just fascinating that they went that far with it.
It's
like
really,
I'm actually
really
surprised.
Yes.
I'm surprised that. I guess I felt like there was always some traditionalists at Nintendo that never would allow that to happen, and there's
always been this sense that there's a little bit of science fiction in it because there's the turrets, right, that have the laser beams that shoot out of their eyes, and those reappear here as what do they call them? Guardians. Yeah. And
I think they're guardians,
right? And now they're all stationary, at least so far, and I know that's going to change.
That's true. Those. They never really talked much about like how that stuff. I guess I always kind of thought it was like light or something. I don't know, in my head canon.
But I mean, they're always you're always pulling like levers that have chains on them. It's not. I pushed a button that lit up and now something
Yeah, no, it's
slid
very
open. It's like it's always feels like gravity is involved. If you can feel the gravity in Zelda games.
yeah. There's a tangibility to it, and even just like the map, right? Like before you reveal an area, it's like a blue grid,
Right.
very sci-fi looking.
That's true.
Like the slate, it's meant to be like a tech. It looks like a weird technology device. And then it was 100 years ago, right, that everything happened. So
The world fell apart.
So it's like, I don't know.
That Calamity Ganon showed up.
It's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of good examples, I think, in Japanese fiction where fantasy and sci-fi are really melded together well. I think Miyazaki does some of that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And so some of it might be cultural. I'm just surprised and kind of delighted because I like when those two things merge.
Sure.
So I'm fascinated to see how far they go with it. I know the Guardians seems like they become a thing throughout, that you need to beat them eventually and stuff,
Right.
and they're really hard. And they clearly are robots, right?
Right.
And then the shrines, there's littler versions that are robots too, but
Right,
and
yeah,
then
they look more like four-legged spiders or something like
the
that.
shrines themselves seem techy in a way. Like
Right, yeah, there's a shield
metal
around the dead body that's been preserving it, and then it turns into digital dust
Right.
as they disappear after they have they say their piece, right?
Right.
Now I'm going to give you the
It's
gift.
kind of Tron looking, like the ceiling is very brightly lit, and it's fascinating.
The
Fascinating
design
game.
choices here are aesthetically are fascinating. But
Stamina.
again, you wonder, like, how Zelda is... How is how much is it Zelda?
Well, I've kind of intentionally not been reading interviews and listening to, because I think they did some GDC stuff, right? And,
They did. They
and
definitely
there's been
did.
some interviews around.
They talked a lot about how they prototyped this in a 2D Zelda engine.
Yeah, right.
An earlier, like a Link to the Past
Right.
style engine.
And then I think a fan went out and made that. Did you read that?
Yes, I did read
That's
that.
pretty
Yes.
funny. But what I was going to say is I know that in those interviews, like a lot of there basically is a new generation of Nintendo designers there, right? Like, not to say they're trying to push, Miyamoto out or anything, but you can feel it, and it looks like Odyssey will also be.
Yes.
Like there'll be some surprising things in Odyssey. So I've just heard a lot of people, both in the press and in game development, just talking about like there seems to be a shift.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's enough Zelda in here, it looks like, so far that I'm okay that calling it a Zelda game, and I'm going to have fun with it, and I can't wait to play it now. But I guess I'm just surprised at how different it is. I think I need to go finish Link Between Worlds. Make sure I finish that before I get in deeply into Breath of the Wild.
Right.
So I have this lineage. I don't think I'll go play Skyward Sword though, but we'll see.
I may, but it'll probably be after I finish Breath of the Wild.
Right. That's only on Wii U anyway, right?
It was on Wii and Wii U, I think. I have it on the Wii.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, of course, Skyward Sword.
Right.
Wiimote.
Exactly.
Yeah, fascinating game.
It is.
I love stamina meters though,
You do, I know. That's the other big Colossus thing.
and I like lighting things on fire. And I did.
You did a lot of that.
I immediately was like, fire!
Right. I was showing you how the stasis mechanic worked.
Yeah.
And how you build up. You can build up. So one of the abilities is you can build up potential in an object while it's paused. So you basically hit it with a stick a whole bunch, and all those add up into one big impulse that happens at the end. And I did that to an exploding barrel, and I hit the wall, and then all the other exploding barrels went all at the same time, and I
lit yourself on fire.
And I lit myself on fire. It was good times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want to take a break, and then we can maybe turn to some feedback?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Welcome back from the break. We spent the first half talking about Breath of the Wild, but now we're going to do a little feedback, try to catch up on all this email we have. You have the first one.
Still looking you in the face, and it's weird.
It is still weird.
Did you tweet picture out?
I did.
Of our ridiculous setup?
Yep.
I still can't believe I'm using the microphone wrong. I feel bad.
You can see that in the photo.
Yeah, exactly. Proof. Okay, so from Phil Rosehill, our speedrunning correspondent. Hi, guys. I'm glad to hear someone else endorsing that swordless speedrun of Link to the Past from this year's Summer Games Done Quick. Andy Lasso, the runner, is incredibly skilled, and Patty, aka P Cull 44444, makes any commentator couch more entertaining. And he sends a link. Maybe we'll put that in show notes or something.
We will.
On to Super Mario World. One of you asked if there were warps as in prior installments. The Star Road serves that function in Super Mario World and can be used to skip most of the game. This, as well as a variety of ways to complete the game, are among the factors that make the game popular for speedrunning. After you've played through the game, check out the 96 exit race from AGDQ 2016, in which the runners must complete all levels normally and also use every secret exit. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with my cursory looking at those maps, just kind of just kind of scrolling around.
Right.
My God.
It's pretty mind-boggling how, well, there's a lot of verticality in those levels as well that you don't necessarily see.
Yeah, and if you don't have a certain item, I assume, you can't get up to some of that stuff. You do things out of certain order. And then I'm in the Brett's, obviously he's been away, so he's not caught up, but I'm in the Forest of Illusion right now. And
you wish you had an axe.
And I was like, I'm lost. This forest is very elusive. I've lost my way.
When are you going to make a call to the hint line?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That
James Roberts.
James last time.
Yeah.
His dad's story, and I know exactly. He warned us, and now I know exactly
where he's talking about.
I'm literally going in circles now. So I'm like, okay, one of these levels has the exit I need to actually progress forward. Otherwise, I'm just the path in the overland is just circular. So
terrific.
Son of a
and Jason Schreier had sent me some direct messages via Twitter this week saying, if there's a yellow dot, I guess, next to the name of the level in the overworld, then there's only one exit. But if there's a red dot, there are multiple exits. So that may be a hint for you.
Did he say that was in the manual? How
I don't remember seeing that in the manual, but it may have been. Yeah. I don't have the manual open anymore. Anyway, I have the next mail. It's from Michael So. He says, Super Mario World Jailbreak for the subject. He says, hi, Brett and Tim. Love the show and have listened to every ep. Well, thank you. That's a lot of eps. He says, Super Mario World is, in my opinion, the best 2D Mario game, so I'm enjoying hearing your thoughts on it with your analytical perspectives, particularly since you've both never played through the game before. The game is much less linear than you think, and the Switch palaces are definitely optional. A 100% playthrough will give you 96 exits, which was referred to in the last mail, but the minimum needed is only 11. My favorite secret exit is the one in the Cheese Bridge area. That one really blew my mind as a kid, so I hope that you find and critique it.
Oh, okay.
Are you aware of the arbitrary code execution glitches in Super Mario World? I've referred to this previously on the cast. Given that you're developers, you might find them pretty interesting. It's possible to beat the game in under 2 minutes by writing code using Koopa shells.
What are you talking about?
There are some entertaining videos by a YouTuber named Seth Bling showing the trick, and then 2 years later, using an expanded version to jailbreak a cartridge to install a mod loader. And I've seen this previously. Anyway, he says, hope you won't mind a small bit of self-promotion at the end. I also co-host a gaming book club podcast called Lost Levels Club, and we've just finished a playthrough of Red Dead Redemption.
Ooh.
A good game. My co-host and I are both based in Hong Kong, and we're about to start a playthrough of Sleeping Dogs, a game set in Hong Kong, with the perspective of people who live there. Anyway, that's all I had to say for now. Looking forward to the next episode, Mike. So here we are, next episode. But, yeah, the jailbreak thing that they do with the Koopa shells.
I don't even understand what you're talking about.
So basically, they're able to execute arbitrary code on the cartridge by using Koopa shells to bump in some certain way. It's hard to really describe. We'll watch the video afterwards.
Yeah.
It's madness.
They're triggering the code via using a shell.
It's more like I think they can actually insert. I think they can actually insert code. It's nuts, right? And I think it's been used. They've used tool assisted runs to actually do it to reprogram the thing in very complicated ways as well. So you use a tool and you can put the shells exactly where you want and do all the stuff. But Yeah, it's madness.
The thing that
I heard somebody describe it on another podcast and was just like, how is that a thing?
Yeah.
And how did somebody figure that out? And,
Yeah.
I mean, just the madness.
Well, it's this game it is so beloved, like people over
Have
time
spent so
are just
much
going to
time.
make
Like
do
your buddy
crazy
who's played
shit.
it 12 times, completed it 100% 12 times.
Right.
Right? And you're just...
And he has all those carts, yeah.
Exactly. And that's just crazy to me, but...
The 96 exit thing, we haven't played enough maybe for me to grok what... Like, I don't get that. Like, okay, so you only need 11 exits to finish the game, but 96 exits, how is that possible or useful? What does it mean?
So there's other levels on each segment of the map.
Yeah.
So like in Donut Plains 1, there's one way that takes you to Donut Plains 2. But there's another one that takes you off to the side. You might remember the map. There's like a little island or something, and there's a level over there.
But 96 is this is the number. Like,
yes.
I get that concept, but
Right,
96 is the crazy part where there's that many, you know what I mean,
right.
alternate paths. If 11 is all you need to finish?
Well, 11, but one of those is going to be on that Star Road that's going to basically take you, like in in the original Super Mario Brothers, you could jump to like level 7 or whatever.
That's fascinating.
No, it's amazing.
So far, to his mention, Cheese Bridge is my favorite. Well, it's
sections of levels.
Hilarious, fun. No, it's only I think one level.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's in
the next
that
section, past Vanilla Dome.
Yeah, forget Chocolate Mountain.
Maybe? Oh, okay, sure.
But it's just one bridge that goes there, but it's just called Cheese Bridge. Is the level? It's kind of hilarious and maddening and cool. But anyway.
Okay, well, I look forward to getting to it next week.
Yeah, you're.
I'm so far behind.
Well, but we were talking about this off air, but like the game state thing. I would not be... I would give up to play on this pace.
I am such a stubborn human being.
You are. Well, you're better at farming the lives and stuff, so...
All right, so you've got one from Rob.
Okay, from Rob Ott. Or Robot.
I know, but there's a space. I got it. Yeah.
Rob Ott. Portrayal of Mario and Peach. Hi, Brett and Tim. I was wondering if you guys would be up for discussing the portrayal of Mario the Italian Plumber in Super Mario World. Mario the Italian Plumber. Having not grown up with console games, the iconic status of Mario has long fascinated me. He is ostensibly just a dopey regular Joe stuck in a magical world. He's not the classic superhero or a grizzled badass you might expect. Yet he is maybe the most famous video game man in the world. Why? Can you see what is so interesting, if anything? That's what. About him in early incarnation of the franchise. Do you find that his characterization is problematic in any way, or doesn't hold up today? Is he an insensitive stereotype? Also, what about Princess Peach as the quintessential damsel in distress? Thanks and keep up the great work, Rob. As an Italian, I am highly offended. No.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
No, I am Italian.
I'm aware of that.
But I'm not offended.
No, I didn't think you were offended.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think the fact of the character has ever mattered at all.
No, it's just it's an oddity that people ask this question of, and like, well, who knows?
Right. I mean, well, they had the character. He seemed to work, and they just kept using him and, matured him over time. But it gets stranger and stranger the longer you go. Because certainly in Super Mario Odyssey, there are regular human beings, and he's like this half-height goblin running around.
Well, and they've taken it a whole nother direction with that, right? Once they added that in. I mean, so in Mario Brothers, not Super Mario, but Mario Brothers.
Okay.
I believe there are pipes, and they're kind of like, it feels like they're in maybe the sewers, and
these turtles
and
are
the
dropping
turtles are
down
coming
somehow.
in, and you're like, they're working together to, and that was after Donkey Kong, though, so it doesn't really make that much sense.
Right, but I think why Donkey Kong is like why he might have been a janitor.
Ah, yeah, right.
Right, because he's basically cleaning the building, and then, oh my god, the monkey comes by, and it's basically King Kong.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you have the damsel in distress. But I do feel like these roles became way too calcified.
Yeah.
And in particular, and he linked to a Chris Sulentrop, who's somebody I know, an opinion he wrote for the New York Times a year or so ago when they had the Mario app on the iPhones.
Yeah, Mario Run.
Mario Run.
Yeah.
And he said, basically, this is great, but I would like to have a game in this style with these characters so that my daughter could play it and not have Peach just be have no power, have her superpower be basically, I have nice hair, right? I mean, it is
the Peach thing is just it's done. Like they got to move on.
They had to move on a long time ago.
Yeah, it's long overdue. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much more to say about that other than just, that trope is a problem the game industry has in various ways. And she, unfortunately, is the ultimate example of that. And it is, it's unfortunate. And even when I feel like, even when she shows up in like Mario Kart or other, when the storyline, quote unquote, isn't about saving her, she's still such a stereotype.
Yes.
And I guess they all are, but I don't know. She and what's
Daisy,
they're just it's a bummer.
Like, now they have also Rosalind, who is from Super Mario Galaxy.
But she hasn't had her own game even. Have they?
I feel she's like she might have had one on the Game Boy Advance, maybe.
Maybe. It's weird. There's some weirdness going on there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do feel like it's a thing that established itself early, and they just made that always be the thing, and I just don't want it anymore. Please stop. It's that part's awful. I don't think that the Italian plumber nature of Mario really existed much beyond those early games in any real meaningful way. I think video game characters you control are about what they can do. And that's why his original name was Jumpman, right? He is the guy who jumps, right? And that was his original ability. He could jump over the barrels, and he could jump on top of the barrels and miss the fireballs or whatever, all the stuff that Donkey Kong would throw at him. But fundamentally, it was about what he could do. And the really unfortunate part about other characters in the Nintendo franchise are about what they can't do, which is in Princess Peach's case, not very much, right? Yeah. She's always being captured and taken out somewhere else, and it's unfortunate. I think.
Well, in the other thing I think about a lot with Mario specifically, and as Brett just said, he was an evolution of his early days, and they just stuck with the iconic nature of him, and over the years. And he was, back in the 8-bit and 16-bit days, like, there wasn't a need to get too much fidelity, so they didn't think about, like, what's his backstory and why is he a plumber and all this stuff. But they just stuck with it, and he just got more and more fidelity and all this stuff. But I think about him from time to time in the context of Mickey Mouse.
Exactly where I was going myself.
Because Mickey Mouse is like, why is it a mouse? Like, he doesn't even really look like a mouse, right? Like, his ears are ridiculous. But, like, you don't question it anymore, right? It's an iconic thing. He has an iconic voice. He is, his shape, the face, silhouette.
Right, the silhouette.
And the style is just weird, right? It doesn't look like a mouse from a mouse guard or something that's kind of trying to portray a mouse the way a mouse looks, but it just sticks, and now it's become a symbol more than it is a mouse,
right?
And I think that's just where Mario
is. I would tend to agree. All right, let me go and dial up the next one here. For me, it's from Stefan Sok, S-O-C, so I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, Stefan. He says, breaking into the industry. We get these every now and again. He says, hi there, I've been listening to your podcast for a little while now, and I gleefully anticipate every episode as it drops in the week. The industry take you have on the game titles you cover and other topics are fascinating, insightful, and a treat to listen to. You quickly made me a fan. It's safe to say I'll be listening for a long time to come. I wanted to ask you a somewhat specific question around breaking into the game industry. I'm about 10 years into a career in marketing and advertising. I originally trained as an animator, with my first few years following college being spent as a graphic designer, motion graphics animator, and 3D artist. All things that I will never be able to do. Following that, I got into Flash development and eventually wielded that into a pretty solid knowledge of web development and related technologies. Today, I'm a director of technology at a digital ad agency, with the bread and butter of my skill set being in the realization of the team's creative vision against the challenges of the technical implementation. My career has led to a lot of positives, and I've learned a lot in a variety of disciplines, but recently I felt the need to make a change. My first love was video games, and getting into game development is an idea that's been rolling around in my head for some time, so I've decided to begin exploring a transition out into that world in earnest. To that end, I've started to learn Unreal Engine and a bit of everything around it, such as the asset creation pipeline, learning its C++ libraries, and so on. Since I have an art and development background, my thinking is to create a few prototypes to get my confidence up with the technology to ultimately create a small demo. Something that could serve as a portfolio piece to get a gig doing something in the world of games, be it as a designer or an environment artist or what have you. I'm mostly attracted to the idea of working with an indie team, but I haven't written anything off as yet, as my first goal is to get my foot in the door. Wanted to ask what you guys thought of this strategy, and if you have any ideas on things I should be doing or doing differently. I'm not even sure if I'm barking up the right tree. The ideas work well in my head, but I honestly have no idea if they're the right approach. Any advice you could provide would be invaluable. Thanks a bunch, etc. From Canada.
Yeah.
It's barking up a lot of trees.
Yeah, I feel like he's making some good decisions already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean getting in
he's already
there,
doing more than
making
a lot of
stuff,
people.
making prototypes. Making things is the way to go.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the whole thing with the pottery, right? Make a lot of vases. It doesn't matter that half of them are ugly.
Right.
But you make a lot of them, and you know, eventually they'll get pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's definitely true. Another thing, he has a ton to offer a game jam team, you know, for a weekend game jam or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a great way to learn skills from other people and kind of, you know, get in a quick, very focused way, absorb some of that stuff. And there's tons of online communities around this stuff these days. I mean, certainly Unreal has its own forums for that specific tech.
Yeah.
But also like TIG Source, which used to be the Independent Games Source, I think is what that stands for. It's a forum. You can look that up, TIG Source, TIG source.com or org or whatever. You'll have to look it up. I don't recall. They have forums. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to try to break in, I always tell people make a demo of something.
Yeah, make a demo. I feel like it sounds like he's, especially with his background and what he's doing for his day job, he's savvy enough to one step that maybe I wouldn't normally suggest, but because he's already kind of working on demo and like an actual tangible thing via Unreal or whatever, maybe he should actually publish something or like put something on iOS or on the store or in Steam or something, right? Like actually go the extra step.
Right, to finish a thing and
do
put
something
it out.
small. Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
perfect. Doesn't have to be big, but do something to give yourself that full loop. Make sure your user, you're playtesting. Try to, I'm sure, I don't know, what did he say, what city he lives in? Is he in Canada?
Just as Canada, yeah.
Say he's in Toronto or something, there's an indie scene there.
Absolutely.
Like connect with those indies, right? And have them play your game, right? And or buy them beer and play my game, whatever.
Absolutely.
Get in there and, get it on the store. I have friends that have made Space Invader clones or whatever, right? It's like, and you learn a lot from it, right? And you're not going to make money, you're not going to get rich, but going through the full pipeline,
hugely helpful. When
you talk to an indie studio that you want to get your foot in the door, and you say, "Well, I've gone through this, and this was an experiment," that will give you a leg up with some, But you've had, I mean, if you're like a director of tech.
Yeah, I feel like you already have probably everything you need to get going on something.
You just need to connect with people.
Maybe some skill acquisition in very specific ways, but generally speaking, it feels like you could slot in somewhere.
Start reaching out to some of the indie companies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you have another one. I don't remember who from.
Edwin Crump.
Edwin Crump
says, mechanical complication and difficulty choice in Super Mario World. Very good title. Subject. I've been listening to the podcast for a while now and always enjoy your insights. I was thinking about your latest first Super Mario World episode, and how complex all the jumping and running mechanics can be. Something I've thought about is that even though there are a large number of mechanics, you can still play pretty much all of the game with just the basic run and jump using the D-pad and one face button. This relates to the concept of graceful degradation, and how it allows anybody to play at whatever skill level they have at that time. It also increases the replay value, as levels can be transformed once you know all the tricks of the trade. Transformed not in terms of the game world itself, but your knowledge of it in a way that's similar to Dark Souls. Also a small point, but Super Mario Bros. 3 has a similar overworld to Super Mario World, which we talked about, but I'm sure lots of people have already told you that. Yes, they have. Thank you. Keep up the great work. Yeah, I feel like we Have we done 2 episodes?
Yeah, we have. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like in the second episode, maybe we talked a little bit about that depth of mechanic.
Right.
Totally agree with him. I think that's still the brilliance of this series, really, is that, and you mentioned it, I think, as well as like you start with everything you need. The one challenge I would have with, as his concept of graceful degradation, maybe is what he's talking about there. I think the trick there is, yes, you have all those skills. And I thought about this. I think I put it in my notes for the 3rd episode, but I don't have them in front of me. The trick with that is you have to be... if you don't have power-ups or you don't have some of the deeper mechanics at your disposal, the game is harder.
Yes.
So yes, you have all the skills you need to succeed. As he said, you're just moving and jumping. And it's one button, and technically anyone can learn that, sure, but it's the hardest way to play the game.
Sure, because, ultimately, yes.
Because of the digital death, right? Like, you give one shot, you touch anything, you're dead. And that is, so it's this weird, I think my note was something about this sort of concept of that inversion of that problem.
Right.
Where it's like, I feel myself, whenever I'm small Mario, I'm just tensely looking for power-ups because I don't want to be that vulnerable. Because I'm not that good. So yeah, it's simple to do, and you can learn the depth of it, but it's, I don't know, just this weird, like, conundrum of, like I said, inversion of, like, well, you'd think it's intuitive what he's saying, that's intuitive design. And it is. Like, yes, technically anyone can play it, but I think they immediately get frustrated when they see how hard it is to succeed as little Mario.
Well, and exactly. I mean, that ghost house that we were having trouble getting through, that I still have to get through.
Yeah.
That, for me, I end up reaching to some of the higher level mechanics just so I can get past the areas I find most difficult as Mario or a smaller Mario. So I go and I fly so that I can get across all of that, but I'm not very good at the flying yet. So I end up falling down sooner than I wanted to, and now I'm in trouble again, and so it's yes. I mean, I
agree with him. It is. I do agree with him that is one of the beauties of the Mario game specifically, right? Like, it is all about that, the simplicity of that stuff, and the depth is there when you want it.
Yes.
And once you learn it, and you get into it when you're ready. And the levels, as I'm going through these levels, and I'm just survival mode. Like, I'm just like, get through this level as quick as I can. I'm not going to explore. I'm not going to look around. Oh, I have a note about next episode. I want to talk about exploration in these games. I'm just getting through. But I can see all the opportunities I could do.
Right.
But I'm so like scared of like going and doing that stuff because it's so punishing.
Right.
Even though I have game save state, so it's like it's I don't know. It's just this weird friction point in my head that's fascinating. But the elegance of that, totally agree with him.
Well, and often in those levels especially that I'm returning to again and again, like Donut Plains, where I know how to get to the place to get lots of points.
You're getting the depth.
I'm getting very good at the moving and pressing B because that's all I'm doing to get to where I want to be.
I think for me, it's playing more, and then with the game state, as we talked about, right? It's the kind of the wrong, unintended way to play. Right? They balanced it for you being punished and having to learn and play those levels over and over again. And I don't think I'm appreciating it as much as I should, playing it the way I am.
It's hard. Okay, well, here's something right on that topic.
Yeah.
From Brian Taylor. His subject is learning by failure. Brian Taylor's a friend of mine from years back now. He says, Brett and Tim, you mentioned the way save states change the experience of the game. And I think how games are tuned based on expectations of the tech that is there. For example, save anywhere, anytime versus save points and checkpoints. Mm-hmm. As tech changed in the 90s, level sizes increased and most consoles shifted to optical media. Do you think that these would have had an effect on the acceptance by players of failure-based learning? Running across a smallish level and getting back to the failure point is a very different way of spending 30 or 45 seconds than waiting for a loading screen to put you back at a checkpoint right before the failure point. Maybe this is a better question for Mario 64, as I remember hearing that they went with the cartridge over the opticals specifically to avoid load times. If getting immediately back into the play after failure is a key part of their game design, then there is something very elegant about hardware being chosen to support that. Yeah, that's a good point. I do remember that they were really concerned about optical read times and using a CD-ROM based media, for example, and it was particularly with N64 because that was a time when on the PC that's when CD-ROMs were hitting. Myst is right around that time. And certainly
Tomb Raider.
Right, Tomb Raider's at that time. There's a lot of things that happened as a result, right? The cartridges could only get so big because of the expensiveness to produce them. That limited their technical choices aesthetically as well. They couldn't have crazy texture detail. You certainly see that in Ocarina, which was the biggest cart ever made for that system. But even there, what textures it has are very blocky and not great.
Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows of the Empire was at the same time. So you get Mario 64 with a character who is basically all composed of just vertex coloring. In Mario.
Oh, is he really?
For the most part, there's maybe a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's just I've got enough polygons to support my overalls and hat and mustache or what have you. But specifically to the difficulty question. Absolutely, if you can save anywhere, which you couldn't in Tomb Raider 1. On the PC you could, but originally on the PlayStation you could not.
I don't even know if on the PC. They have save, like, diamond gem things you find in
Was
places.
it a resource? Or
no,
it could just
it was a
save
location.
there? Okay, you could save at that spot.
It might have been a resource too, I forget. Might have been both. But
it's been a while.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Certainly I know on the PlayStation...
But there was limitations.
There were limitations. And then on Tomb Raider 2 that you could save anywhere, and that made that game a lot easier to play.
Yeah.
And they could make different sorts of challenges. And I think often that led to mistakes where
that's what I was just going to say.
They would make something that was difficult to do that would have been spectacular if you had pulled it off the first time. Yeah. And then the 30th time you're like, I just want to jump this jet ski through this window like I know I have to do. Yeah. And... Right. We ran into that a little bit even with Half-Life 2. We both stopped at the part where there was a lot more failure-based skill, right? With the boat thing.
The airboat.
Airboat, yes.
Yeah, he's completely right. It's to be careful what you wish for. We've talked about this from time to time of like once you get the ability to make it's the Jurassic Park quote that I always bring up and love is just like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Yes.
And it's sort of that crutch problem, right? It was like, well, we can save anywhere now. So then we get lazy and we design a level that accomplishes that goal. But the thing that Nintendo, I feel like, still keeps in their DNA, maybe even still with Breath of the Wild, is this just like, no, we're going to thoughtfully think through how this stuff is all laid out and plays and difficulty and all of that stuff, and it's really specifically for that. And I guess that's the point of when I'm playing with the save game state, and like it doesn't feel like the game they probably wanted it to be when I play it that way.
Right.
And I actually didn't know this. A friend at work who listens, Jeremy, he's playing on his NES Classic. He's playing, I think, the same game, or maybe he's playing Mario 3. No, he's playing Mario 3.
Right.
It was on
Just
SNES. But he was, as he was listening to the podcast, he wanted to play the Mario 3 again. But it has save game states, multiple ones.
Really?
Which I didn't know.
I didn't know that.
So all of those classic NES games, you can just go back and save anywhere. Kind of thing.
On the classic.
On the classic.
I see. Yes.
On the classic specifically. So he's just been talking about like this, like how his psychology has changed, right? Where he's being a completionist in a totally different way because he can go back and do things. Lives don't matter,
right?
But he's collecting them all anyway. So yeah, it fundamentally changes things. I think the other thing that happened with optical is streaming started to change the way that you think about pacing and difficulty and level design and stuff, because some of the games,
because there are technical
streaming
requirements that you have to manage. Yeah. You know, how much of that data can I get in? And you see that especially in like God of War, where you have these long staircases or tunnels or whatever to go from area to area. After a boss battle, there's this long transition that feels weird.
Yeah.
Yes.
It changes the pacing.
And it works really well going in one direction, but if you try to go back, it's horrible. So it definitely changed the landscape in a lot of ways, but including difficulty, because you wouldn't want that to happen right after having to stream a bunch of stuff in or things like this. So you have to think about all those things too.
Yeah.
You have to design around those technologies that you have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always true if you're going to do a good job.
I think one of the previous listeners mentioned Dark Souls, right? In some context.
Yes.
I think that's another good example of like that popularity coming back, right? Where it's like there's punishment to death, and you got to go through that process. You have to earn the education of the world, the mechanics. You have to earn that, and then when you make it, it feels way better.
Right.
And at the time, you mentioned Tomb Raider 2, like we thought the answer was save anywhere. It's like, oh no, everyone's chasing save anywhere. That's the solution. All of our problems are solved, but not realizing the sacrifice that's going to make in the design of difficulty and the design of all this other stuff is like all that stuff gets thrown out.
Well, you end up having to have much bigger games too, often because
bigger games. You get lazier designs. I think.
Yes.
Super Meat Boy is the other example that comes up sometimes. Because it was instant.
Yeah, as soon as you died, you're instantly right there.
Small levels, instant reloads. It felt fine because of that. Any game like that doesn't have instant reloads after Super Meat Boy came out, especially in the indie space, that was one of the things that they're judged by now.
Right.
It's like, how long was that getting back into the action load time? And if it's too long, then that's a big knock against you.
Right, and you have to think as a designer, you have to, and I actually talked about this with a designer this week in a different context, which was more narrative context, but it's the same sort of question. How much can you afford to alienate how much of your audience at a time, right? So you make these choices about how much difficulty you're going to have.
Yeah, that's good.
If you then add on things like the load times are too long. Oh, okay, well now I have, not only is it punishingly difficult, but there's a lot of time between my next attempt. Or if it's only checkpoints, then I have a long way to go of stuff to repeat before I can do that thing that's hard for me to do, instead of being able to do that right again. So, I mean, basically with your save states, you have the opportunity to just, as soon as you get to a challenge will be difficult for you, have a save state.
Yeah.
And just do that
and
thing.
Just repeat it.
Until you get past it.
Yeah.
And then you never see it again.
Yeah, but it's not cementing in my head. I get past it, but...
Right.
It's like... Yeah, it's like somebody's telling me the answer. I didn't actually learn the answer.
Sure,
sure. It's like, what's the answer? It's 4. It's like, well, I didn't actually put 2 and 2 together.
Wow. Good arithmetic. Okay, well, we've read a whole bunch of email. We've gone a little bit longer than I think we expected to, even on the feedback. So I guess we'll call it there.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to catch up next week with the chocolate whatever. And I have to get past the goat. I think it's right. I think you're right. I think it's Chocolate Mountains, and then the Forest of Illusion, and we'll pick up there.
Yeah,
like we were going to.
Yeah.
You can reach us via email at devgameclub@gmail.com. Of course, we love to have your reviews on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as I guess they're now called. That really helps us reach new listeners, and I appreciate that. Another thing that helped us reach new listeners, I want to shout out to the Game Informer show. Because I was on that this past week, and I appeared. Ben interviewed me, and we talked about my whole career. It wasn't just Tacoma coming out or whatever. It's like, oh, here's this guy who's been doing this for 20 years. So we talk a little bit about Dev Game Club. We talk about all the different places I've worked, and really the whole thing.
That's been really long.
It was like 6 hours. He had to whittle it down.
Such an old.
Thanks.
Developer.
Well, I was working on Abakai, right? We made all kinds of games. You can move those things around. Anyway, so you can you go hunt that down, and they have a video version of the interview on YouTube if you care to watch that and see me. I had to shave. I knew I was going to be videoed, so I shaved for the day. I had to put it in my phone. I was so tired from crunching. So I hope it wasn't too crunch drunk. And then finally, I guess you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Brett_Duville. The podcast is at Dev Game Club, and he is
at Tim Longa Jr. with the JR at the end.
We will see you again next Wednesday, and I guess for now, then we'll say good night.
Good night.